Hello, everyone, and welcome to AP Daily. My name is Greg Hill, and I teach at Dr. John D. Horn High School in Mesquite, Texas, just to the east of Dallas. Today, we're going to talk about topic 2.1 population distribution. The focus of this video is to look at the physical and human factors that influence the distribution of population. What will we learn? Ecumene, when you'd rather live here instead over there. The ecumene is the areas of permanent settlement of the Earth's surface by humans. First, physical factors. Climate influences where people live. People tend not to live in cold lands, but tend to live in more moderate temperatures. More people also live in lower latitude areas because of the abundance of rainfall. Landforms. Where can I survive? People tend to live on areas where they can grow crops or where there's sustainable natural resources that can sustain human life. Water bodies. Where can I access fresh water? Water for me and water for my plants. Human factors. Culture is an important part where people tend to live along their cultural groups. Economics. Where can people make money? Where do they have the ability to barter and trade? This is another huge influence on where people migrate and settle. History, whether it be wars, whether it be history with neighboring people, these all influence where people tend to live. Political influences, the amount of freedom that I have, the type of government that I'm under, these all influence where people tend to live as well. Let's look at an example. China. The majority of China's population live in a line in the east from Harbin in the north to Guangzhou down in the south. This is the area of China's most fertile soils and also known as China's breadbasket. There is an intense amount of agriculture that takes place in China in these regions, and it also has some of the largest cities in the world, whether it be Shanghai, the capital Beijing, and several others that have well over 15 to 20 million people. This is also home to China's political and many economic centers as well. And so this tends to draw people from a lot of the hinterland in a what we call in geography a rural to urban migration. This is also home to China's gateway cities like Beijing and Shanghai, where a lot of people from outside of China who are migrating to China tend to come here first and settle as well due to economic opportunity. Let's practice. Looking at different scales, what factors would influence settlement in the mountains? Now, again, most people won't settle in the mountains due to their high elevations, but for some people, when we couple this with cultural ideas, such as the peoples of Ecuador, there is a spiritual component and a cultural component that draws people here. In Otavalo, Ecuador, this is a part of Ecuador's Sacred Valley. So people tend to come here over time as a sacred ritual especially for the indigenous people. Again, what factors on a national scale and on a regional scale would influence settlement in the mountains? Along the Andes in South America, a lot of the Inca and a lot of the indigenous peoples of South America tended to congregate along the Andes Mountains in the sacred valleys of both Ecuador and Peru, and also because of its fertile volcanic soils. Moving into Ecuador, it also was a central market for the Incan Empire, drawing a lot of people from surrounding areas into the marketplace. And it's still to this day, Otavalo contains one of the most important marketplaces in all of Ecuador. So what should we take away? Physical factors, whether it be climate or one's place on a continent, influence where people choose to live. Human factors such as culture and other aspects of the human experience also influence where people live as well. I want to give a special shout out to the Falcons at Mashpee High School in Mashpee, Massachusetts, and teacher Celeste Reynolds. My name is Greg Hill, and this has been your AP Daily. Thank you. Hello, and welcome to AP Daily. My name is Greg Hill, and I teach at John Horn High School in Mesquite, Texas. We're going to continue our talk about population distribution. Topic 2.1. What will we learn? Today we're going to talk about population density. But first, we need to look at density versus distribution. Density is the number of people in a space. As we all know, geography is a spatial science. We look at how humans interact in a space, how humans are distributed in that space, and density allows us to look at the sheer number of people in a particular space. Distribution. This is the spatial spread of people in a space. It's important for geographers, but for the sake of this video, we're going to specifically focus on density. There are three types of density we look at in AP Human Geography: arithmetic density, physiological density, and agricultural density. First, let's look at arithmetic density. Now, commonly, we generally call arithmetic density just population density in general, but there are three components. Arithmetic density looks at the sheer number of people per square mile or per square kilometer. Sometimes this is called crude population density. Physiological density. This is the number of people per unit of arable land. And then agricultural density looks at the number of farmers per unit of arable land. Let's look at some examples. Arithmetic density. How do we calculate it? You take the total population of an area and divide it by the surface area, sometimes known as the land area. Looking at this map of global population density, you see that there are spatial differences throughout different regions of the United States and also throughout the world. We'll visit this in videos on topic 2.2. We can also look at population density at the county level. We can look at population density at even the city level. For example, cities like Manhattan in New York shows us intense population density on such a narrow strip of land. If you were to compare this with, say, a rural area of Kansas or a rural area of Iowa, you would get a different population density than you would in the city of Manhattan. When we look at these population densities, one of the most common things that geographers use in modern times is how land and man are intersecting with each other. Areas that used to have very small population densities or physiological densities are now starting to see expansive growth as people move from rural areas to urban areas. Physiological density, how do we calculate it? You take the total population of an area and you divide it by the amount of arable, or as I like to call it, farmable land. This is land that people can use to grow crops. Agricultural density gives us another take. We look at the number of farmers of an area divided by the amount of arable land. Again, arable land is land that is suitable for farming. Let's look at an example. Egypt is a classic example that many AP Human geographers use as a great example of looking at the three different types of densities. As we know, Egypt is in the northern part of Africa in the Sahara Desert. With that said, most of Egypt's population is straddled on the Nile River. So as we look at its arithmetic density, taking the total surface area of Egypt, it has an arithmetic density of 98 people per square mile. But if you look at its physiological density, the area of people in its unit of arable land, it goes up to 6,995 people per square mile. With that said, what does that tell us as geographers? That humans are putting a lot of stress on the land than we could commonly see by just looking at the arithmetic density. So what are countries like Egypt doing for this? They're starting to rearrange and produce new cities, even so much as moving their capital from Cairo to what they call the new capital, simply and plain. What they're trying to do is relieve the stress of the people along the Nile River Valley and move them more towards the Sinai Peninsula. So let's practice. Looking at this, take a moment and go through the answer options for this question. Physiological population density differs from crude population density in that physiological density, and the answer is C, explains density in terms of people per arable square land unit, while crude density explains density in terms of people per total square land unit. What should we take away? Population density allows for geographers to describe the human environment interaction by looking at the distribution of people and their impact and stresses on resources. I want to send a special shout out to the Skeeters of Mesquite High School and teacher Kenny Martin. Thank you. And this has been AP Daily.